Hello everyone, just a short fun video. To be clear, this is not my work. This is from Darwin's Greatest Hits. If you are not a subscriber, I don't know what you're thinking. I just realized that he has less than 1,000 subs, and that is criminal, people. You need to go sub to him. His work is amazing, hilarious, and I am honored that he would take the time to make a video highlighting a idiotic conversation I had with Dawkins deity, Darth Darwin, whatever he's decided to call himself now. I must admit, I did not enjoy myself. In fact, I got very heated through the conversation. Barney did a much better job than me. In fact, he even got Darwin's deity, or whatever the jackass's name is, to rage quit. So kudos again, Barney. Great job. And thanks to Dawkins' Greatest Hits for allowing me to mirror this. Love your stuff, man. When I'm trying to ask specific questions, he throws it back and starts asking irrelevant questions to me and about my epistemology and about my thought process. We've gone over mine quite a bit with you, and I've admitted everything because I'm honest. On the other hand, when I try to get to the nuts and bolts of yours, instead of honestly investigating what you're saying, you're just going to keep throwing it back to me and saying, how do you know anything? Now, again, what my second follow-up question to 1 + 1 is 2 is, are you making the assertion that 1 + 1 is 2 in an absolutist sense?
Yeah, God has created the world to operate in a law-like way because he is the supreme lawgiver. He's revealed this in his revelation. Now, you've said that I didn't answer the question. I did. I said, God, we know certain things because of God's natural and special revelation. Natural revelation is what we know by virtue that one true creator exists through everything that exists, and we know it innately. And secondly, we know it through special revelation through the 66 books of the Bible. Now, you ask me, how do we justify that? We say that the scripture is self-attesting and self-verifying. If you attempt to justify the absolute authority of the revelation of God, independent of the revelation of God, that will be logically incoherent, because then you would have to appeal to an authority other than God himself to confirm that it is the authority of God. So what I've explained to you is the revelation of God is demonstrated by virtue of the revelation of God. That's called epistemic circularity. One cannot appeal to an ultimate authority by appealing to another ultimate authority. That would be logically incoherent.
By that same reasoning, if the atheist took the laws of logic as an ultimate authority, it would be logically incoherent for DD to ask for a different ultimate authority to justify that.
Every system of thought gets to the place where they say that's the most basic standard for knowing. And then if you ask the question, well, how do you know that that's the right standard? A person is either going to have to offer that standard as the verification of the standard, or is going to look at something else outside of that standard to verify the standard. Now, if you look at something outside of that standard, is the standard the ultimate one? Obviously not, because what you look at that point becomes more ultimate than what you called your ultimate standard. So now we got to start the question all over again. Now that thing that you appealed to, is it an ultimate standard? If it's an ultimate standard, it is going to have to authorize itself or appeal to something outside of itself. If it appeals to something outside of itself, is it the ultimate standard? No, I mean, this is getting boring, Dr. Bonson. Move on. You all get the point, don't you?
Do you affirm, do you claim, do you assert 1 + 1 is 2 in an objective, absolute sense? Simple, yes, no.
To the degree that we're observing events where God does not supernaturally intervene to supersede the regularities of nature, then 1 + 1 would equal 2. If God were to decide to supernaturally supersede the laws that he has created, not violate, not stop, but supersede, he could make 1 + 1 = 3 if he so chose. Okay?
So the question is you seem to have a problem with me not having a absolute and objective foundation for my reasoning and my, I guess, truth claims, i.e. facts, when you just admitted that something as simple as mathematics, 1 + 1, you can't know, capital K, objectively, that equals 2. So what I would like to know is why, if you have admitted you can't know anything like that, why should we take you seriously?
Okay, the question that I asked you that you didn't answer, here was the question.
Run.
The question was, you said that something I stated was wrong. Is what I verbalized, did it violate some absolute?
Again, remember, I have no absolutes, so I'm not going to say that it did, no. But again, why don't you answer my question, because you have no absolutes. You just demonstrated you have no absolutes either.
If you say that I'm wrong, that presupposes that I have uttered something that contradicts an absolute. So have my words,
This is back to the script.
So could you just explain one thing to me? I don't understand this part of what you're saying, that you know that miracles aren't impossible. I understand that you might believe they're impossible. How do you know that? How do you know that miracles are impossible? Unbelievers feel they know that such events cannot take place because they've got a scientific outlook. They're convinced that nature operates in a predictable, law-like fashion. And so the unbeliever will say miracles would run counter to the regularities of our ordinary experience. Our experience wouldn't be completely predictable, they protest, if there were miracles. To which the astute apologist ought to reply, isn't that the point?
DD, how do you know that 1 + 1 = 2, since God could have performed a miracle such that 1 + 1 = 3?
When you talk about observation, are you including that they're the sense perception?
Yes.
Okay. Now, does sense perception, do each of the senses entail for their meaning that there are causal connections between events?
To each? Can you?
Let's take eyesight. Okay. When you talk about observation and hence sense perception, we have 5 senses. Now, one of them is eyesight we can use, for example. Now, when you use those terms to tell me about how you know things work, does eyesight entail within its own meaning that there are causal connections between events?
I assume so, yes. I'm not
okay,
sure
now,
what you're asking and or
right. So on what basis do you assert that there are indeed causal connections? And be careful how you answer the question, because if you tell me how you know there are causal connections between events and you appeal to something that includes causal connections as a part of his meaning, I'm going to call you out on it.
Doesn't DD use his senses to read the Bible? Doesn't DD think Revelation includes causal connections as part of its meaning? How does DD justify knowing about causal connections then?
Can consistent sequences be produced by chance as well as necessity?
They can.
Okay, good. Now, do you have the capacity to differentiate between any series of consistencies that are simply the product of spontaneous occurrence or laws? Do you have the capacity to differentiate between the two?
So, only probabilistically.
No, you're not understanding the question.
If we can't distinguish between chance and laws, then how can we distinguish revelation from chance? As far as I know, DD has never answered this question.
Okay, so can chance produce the same consistent, reliable sequencing as necessity does?
Yes.
Okay, now, so if you appeal to any particular sequencing, how would you be able to differentiate whether the consistent sequencing is the product of chance, and by chance I mean spontaneous occurrence, or by necessity. And please don't say by probability, because that's already been ruled out.
No, it hasn't.
I'm going to explain to you. Probability requires a presupposition of causal connections and laws of nature for its meaning. So you can't appeal to probability.
DD, on your view, is there something that doesn't presuppose causality for its meaning?
When it comes to argumentation, okay?
Okay.
If you argue by induction, that is logically invalid. In order to have a valid conclusion in an argument, it has to be deductive. In other words, you have to have a first premise, a second premise, followed by an inference rule, where the conclusion is both valid and sound.
Validity and soundness are not properties of a conclusion, they are properties of deductive arguments. Philosopher Patrick Hurley writes in his logic book, "A valid deductive argument is an argument in which it is impossible for the conclusion to be false, given that the premises are true. A sound argument is a deductive argument that is valid and has all true premises. A strong inductive argument is an inductive argument in which it is improbable that the conclusion be false given that the premises are true. In such arguments, the conclusion does in fact follow probably from the premises. A cogent argument is an inductive argument that is strong and has all true premises."
Now, if I ask you for a rational justification that there are causal connections between events, giving me inductive reasoning that there are causal connections between events is logically fallacious.
No, it's not.
Okay.
So, wait.
My head wants to explain right now. It is I'm going to tell you why it's Do you know what? Do you understand what it's meant by being logically fallacious? Do you know what a fallacy is?
It is not certain.
No. A fallacy.
No,
a fallacy.
What you are describing is
Barney.
It is not certain.
Barney. A fallacy. Listen,
Fallacious
you know,
means that it is not safe to make.
No, what it means
conclusion. Okay, so deductive reasoning has to be valid, both valid and sound.
Barney,
For
listen,
something to be
Barney,
sound, first you have to know the truth.
Okay.
You have to
Barney,
know
if I say to you, Barney, if I say to you, I know, but you're not understanding what the nature of a logical fallacy is.
That does
now,
not
Barney,
justify you interrupting.
Okay, Barney.
Because if that's a justification for interrupting, then I can just keep interrupting you.
Barney, we're at the same point we were in the last conversation. You're simply being stubborn. I'm trying to explain to you, you have incorrect reasoning on a number of points, and you're simply being stubborn. I am patiently trying to explain to you why you are incorrect. Okay? Now, in philosophy and in debates, okay, it is a fallacy to conclude that something is the case based upon inductive reasoning. If I assert to you that all swans are white because every swan that I've seen in the past have been consistently white, and if everyone who has witnessed swans says they saw a white swan, unless you can argue that all swans in the set have been observed, then to conclude that all swans are white is in philosophy a logical fallacy.
Yes.
You understand?
Yes. Do you?
Okay, good. Now, good.
Wait.
Now,
Wait. My reply.
No,
so,
you know what?
So, I agree. It is fallacious to conclude that because you have seen parts, therefore it is certainly so. However,
Barney,
it is not fallacious to conclude that you have seen parts, therefore it is probably so. And that's
Barney,
the difference.
Barney,
Inductive reasoning gives you
Barney,
probabilistic conclusions.
We're having the same problem we did last time.
Does DD not know that there are cogent inductive arguments in philosophy?
So, for example, it doesn't matter in an argument that the conclusion is valid. The conclusion must be sound. And soundness is the result that each of the premises are established or agreed upon of being true. Now, when you employ inductive reasoning, okay, you are not establishing that the premises are true.
No,
okay?
you're
So
you're establishing the probability with which they are
Okay,
true.
Barney, I'm trying to, let me finish.
Can you wrap it up?
Barney, when you appeal to inductive reasoning in philosophy, and this is not a debatable point, the conclusion followed inductive reasoning is not guaranteed.
It's not guaranteed.
Okay, good. Therefore, to use inductive reasoning and saying, therefore, the conclusion is true, in philosophical debate is a formal fallacy.
I agree.
Good. Now, if you attempt to use inductive reasoning to justify that there are causal connections, that is a fallacy.
No, it's not.
William Lane Craig uses induction to justify the causal premise in his Kalam cosmological argument.
Let me mention a third point briefly in support of this first premise, and then I'll close. Third point is that common experience and scientific evidence confirm the truth of premise one. Common experience and scientific evidence confirm the truth of premise one. Premise one is constantly verified and never falsified. So it's hard to understand how any atheist who is committed to modern science could deny, in the light of the evidence, that premise one is more plausibly true than false. Even if it's not certain, surely the evidence makes it more plausibly true than false. It's never falsified, it's always verified, and that gives us good inductive grounds for accepting this premise.
Oh, what a hit. Look out. Brad Smith. My goodness.